Hi. So, we had an interesting experience earlier today, and now we're going to try again. We're going to start with the Bible reading, and I apologize for any confusion that there may have been. I hope that Granny Bear and Rebecca are able to join us again. I see one person that's probably Mom.
You can tell them what happened.
So, apparently Mom got stung by something or bit by something, but we don't know.
Neck.
We didn't actually see it.
It was
And
a vampire.
maybe it was an invisible
Sparkly vampire.
invisible vampire. So, all right. So, hi, Granny Bear. All right. So we are going to read 1 Samuel. I almost said Genesis. I don't know what's coming over me. We're going to read 1 Samuel chapter 18, and this is the English Standard Version. This is take 2, and go. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and all in the sight of Saul's servants. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another, and they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?" And Saul eyed David from that day on. The next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre. And as he did day by day, Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall," but David evaded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them. Then Saul said to David, "Here is my elder daughter Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." And David said to Saul, "Who am I, and who are my relatives, my father's clan in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" But at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel the Mehatholite for a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, "Let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." And Saul commanded his servants, "Speak to David in private and say, 'Behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law.'" And Saul's servants spoke those words in the ears of David. And David said, Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation?" And the servants of Saul told him, Thus and so did David speak. Then Saul said, "Thus shall you say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged of the king's enemies." Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David arose and went along with his men and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for a wife. But when Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. So that is 1 Samuel chapter 18. I just wanted to really quickly mention about the part where Jonathan made a covenant with David, and so this is very symbolic. And so what he did, he stripped himself of the robe that was on him, and he gave him his armor and his sword and his bow and his belt. Well, who was Jonathan? Jonathan was the prince. Jonathan was the prince, and he's giving David his robe. He's giving David his sword. Princes have special swords, right? He's giving David his bow and his armor, right? And so this is symbolic of Jonathan recognizing David as the next king. That's how I interpret that anyway. And remember, just a chapter ago, in fact, it wasn't even a chapter ago, David refused Saul's armor, but yet he took Jonathan's armor. So, we will continue with 1 Samuel chapter 19 tomorrow. I don't know why you're here.
I just wanted to say that my name was actually...
Oh, it wasn't actually Jonathan from our family, and it wasn't actually David from our family. So, Jonathan didn't give me his armor. That's not how it happened.
He didn't kill Goliath.
And I didn't kill Goliath. So, all right.
I was named after Jonathan from the Bible.
Is that better? That's better, isn't it? Okay. All right, so synopsis time. So, in the last chapter, they were running away from orcs. There were some drums, and there was a Balrog, and Gandalf said, "I'm a servant of the secret fire," and "You shall not pass!" And the Balrog said, "Oh, wow, he's really dangerous," and he ran away. And that's how it happened.
Dad?
Okay,
Wait,
fine.
He didn't say
Now,
you shall
Kimber...
not pass.
Yeah, he did say, "You shall not pass," like about 5 times.
He said you cannot pass.
True story.
Wait a minute. Okay.
He's saying
Time out. All right.
Coming out.
You cannot pass.
He said you cannot pass, but then the last time I think he said you shall not.
You cannot pass. Nope, I think he said you cannot pass. Check that when we watch the movie, because I think he says you shall not pass in the movie.
Yeah, that's
but
very
the book
famous.
is original.
Huh? I know. Okay, why are you guys arguing with me?
I'm not trying to argue.
Okay. Golly. I get attacked. All right, so anyway, he said you cannot pass, and the Balrog agreed with him and said, "Yep, you're right." Ran away. Now Kimberly's going to say how it really happened.
So, what actually happened, don't mind me, I'm doing a bit of sketching. What actually happened was, he went over and he was trying to like hold off all the orcs and everything from getting through to the passage where he and the rest of the party was. And so he used his magic to make some sort of door sealing spell, and it didn't work because there was someone else or something else that had magic also that blasted open the door and caved in the tunnel. And then so he started running over and met the rest of the party. They go into this place that had a very narrow bridge, and so they start crossing the bridge one at a time with Gandalf at the end. And so when
What's the name of the place? The Bridge of Khazad-dûm,
Cardin.
right?
Okay.
What's the other name of the bridge?
Cardin.
The Bridge of Gandalf's Doom.
Okay.
Oh gosh.
But I don't think he died.
He fell to his, like, what else could have happened to him?
That giant thing had wings.
He floated.
Yeah, and it stung me.
Gandalf flew away because he has floating powers.
Okay. So then the I forget what it's called.
The Balrog?
The Balrog. Meh.
It's a bell rock. Not a bell rock. It's not a rock, it's a rock.
Shh.
But yeah,
Whatever.
Okay, I
So-
don't think we're going to have time to read tonight.
Go, Kimmy.
Okay, so the Balrog, it was this really big fire thing, and it had bat-like wings and a whip, and like I think a flaming sword in the other hand, or something like that. And Gandalf, he stood in the middle of the bridge and he said, "You can't pass, you can't pass, you can't pass." And everybody else crossed the bridge, and then I think like the bridge fell down, and then it used its whip to grab Gandalf's leg, and he said, "Fly, you fools!" And then they ran off, and Strider, I'm going to keep calling him Strider because it's easier to remember, he became the new leader, and there was one point when they were fighting some orcs that Frodo nearly died if it weren't for Bilbo giving him the chainmail armor. That's a secret.
Mithril.
Yeah, the mithril armor.
And it's indestructible.
Not quite. It might not be. I don't know. But I am going to hand it off to Dad.
Hi, so I'm going to color while I read. I hope you don't mind.
Did you move your feet?
I don't think she heard me. All right, so this is chapter 6, Lothlórien, and we are not going to get all the way through it. It is 22 pages. We'll see how far we get. I haven't looked to find a stopping point, but I'm probably going to stop sooner than later, and we'll finish it up tomorrow. So, all right. Chapter 6, Lothlórien. "Alas, I fear we cannot stay here longer," said Aragorn. He looked toward the mountains and held up his sword. "Farewell, Gandalf," he cried. "Did I not say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware? Alas, that I spoke true. What have we without you?" Excuse me. He turned to the company. Aragorn didn't say that, by the way. He turned to the company. "We must do without hope," he said. "At least we may yet be avenged. Let us gird ourselves and weep no more. Come, we have a long road and much to do." They rose and looked about them. Northward the dale ran up into the glen of shadows between two great arms of the mountains, above which 3 white peaks were shining: Celebdil, Fanuenhol, and Caradhras, the mountains of Moria. At the head of the glen a torrent flowed like a white lace over an endless ladder of short falls, and a mist of foam hung in the air about the mountain's feet. "Yonder is the Dimrill stair," said Aragorn, pointing to the falls, "down the deep cloven way that climbs beside the torrent we should have come, if fortune had been kinder." "Or Caradhras less cruel," said Gimli. "There he stands, smiling in the sun." He shook his fist at the furthest of the snow-capped peaks and turned away. To the east, the outflung arm of the mountains marched to a sudden end, and far lands could be descried beyond them, wide and vague. To the south, the misty mountains receded endlessly as far as sight could reach. Less than a mile away and a little below them, for they still stood high up on the west side of the dale, there lay a mere. It was long and oval, shaped like a great spearhead thrust deep into the northern glen, but its southern end was beyond the shadows under the sunlit sky. Yet its waters were dark, a deep blue like clear evening sky seen from the lamp-lit room. Its face was still and unruffled. About it lay a smooth sward, shelving down on all sides to its bare, unbroken rim. "There lies the Mirrormere, deep Kheled-Zaram," said Gimli sadly. "I remember that he said, 'May you have joy of the sight,' but we cannot linger there. Now long shall I journey ere I have joy again. It is I that must hasten away, and he that must remain." The company now went down the road from the gates. It was rough and broken, fading to a winding track between heather and wind that thrust amid the cracking stones, but still it could be seen that once long ago a great paved way had wound upward from the lowlands of the dwarf kingdom. In places there were ruined works of stone beside the path, and mounds of green topped with slender birches or fir trees sighing in the wind. An eastward bend led them hard by the sward of Mirrormere, and there, not far from the roadside, stood a single column broken at the top. "That's Durin's stone," cried Gimli. "I cannot pass without turning aside for a moment to look at the wonder of the dale." "Be swift, then," said Aragorn, looking back toward the gates. "The sun sinks early. The orcs will not, maybe, come out till after dusk. But we must be far away before nightfall. The moon is almost spent, and it will be dark tonight." "Come with me, Frodo," cried the dwarf, springing from the road. "I would not have you go without seeing Kheled-Zaram." He ran down the long green slope. Frodo followed slowly, drawn by the still blue water. In spite of hurt and weariness, Sam came up behind. Beside the standing stone, Gimli halted and looked up. It was cracked and weather-worn, and the faint runes upon its side could not be read. "This pillar marks the spot where Durin first looked in the Mirrormere," said the dwarf. "Let us ourselves once ere we go." They stooped over the dark water. At first they could see nothing, then slowly they saw the forms of the encircling mountains mirrored in the profound blue, and the peaks were like plumes of white flame above them. Beyond there was a space of sky. There were jewels sunk in the deep shone glinting stars. There, like jewels sunk in the deep, shone glinting stars, though sunlight was in the sky above. Of their own stooping forms no shadow could be seen. "O Kheled-Zaram, fair and wonderful," said Gimli. "There lies the crown of Durin till he wakes. Farewell." He bowed and turned away, and hastened back up the green sward to the road again. "What did you see?" said Pippin to Sam, but Sam was too deep in thought to answer. And here is a picture of the Mirrormere. There it is. The road now turned south and went quickly downward, running out from between the arms of the dale. Some way below the mere they came on a deep well of water, clear as crystal, from which a freshet fell over a stone lip and ran glistening and gurgling down a steep rocky channel. "Here is the spring from which the silver lode rises," said Gimli. "Do not drink of it. It is icy cold." Soon it becomes a swift river, and it gathers water from many other mountain streams, said Aragorn. Our road leads beside it for many miles, for I shall take you by the road that Gandalf chose, and first I hope to come to the woods where the silver lode flows into the great river out yonder. They looked as he pointed, and before them they could see the stream leaping down to the trough of the valley, and then running on and away into the lower lands, until it was lost in a golden haze. "There lies the woods of Lothlórien," said Legolas. "That is the fairest of all the dwellings of my people. There are no trees like the trees of that land, for in the autumn their leaves fall not, but turn to gold. Not till the spring comes and the new green opens do they fall, and then the boughs are laden with yellow flowers, and the floor of the wood is golden, and golden is the roof, and its pillars are of silver, for the bark of the trees is smooth and gray. So still our songs in Mirkwood say, our heart would be glad if I were beneath the eaves of that wood, and it were springtime." "My heart will be glad even in the winter," said Aragorn, "but it lies many miles away. Let us hasten." For some time Frodo and Sam managed to keep up with the others, but Aragorn was leading them at a great pace, and after a while they lagged behind. They had eaten nothing since the early morning. Sam's cut was burning like fire, and his head felt light. In spite of the shining sun, the wind seemed chill after the warm darkness of Moria. He shivered. Frodo felt every step more painful, and he gasped for breath. At last Legolas turned, and seeing them now far behind, he spoke to Aragorn. The others halted, and Aragorn ran back, calling to Boromir to come with him. "I am sorry, Frodo," he cried, full of concern. "So much has happened this day, and we have much need of haste, that I have forgotten that you were hurt, and Sam too. You should have spoken. We have done nothing to ease you as we ought, though all the orcs of Moria were after us. Come now. A little further on there is a place where we can rest for a little. There I will do what I can for you. Come, Boromir, we will carry them." Soon afterward they came upon another stream that ran down from the west, and joining its bubbling water with the hurrying Silverlode, together they plunged over a fall of green-hued stone and foamed down into a dell. About it stood fir trees, short and bent, and its sides were steep and clothed with hart's tongue and shrubs of wholeberry. At the bottom there was a level space, through which the stream flowed noisily over shining pebbles. Here they rested. It was now nearly 3 hours after noon, and they had come only a few miles from the gates. Already the sun was westering. While Gimli and the 2 younger hobbits kindled a fire of brush and fir wood, and drew water, Aragorn tended for Sam and Frodo. Sam's wound was not deep, but it looked ugly, and Aragorn's face was grave as he examined it. After a moment he looked up with relief. "Good luck, Sam," he said. "Many have received worse than this in payment for the slaying of their first orc. The cut is not poisoned, and the wounds of orc blades too often are. It should heal well when I have tended it. Bathe when Gimli has heated water." He opened his pouch and drew out some withered leaves. "They are dry, and some of the virtue has gone," he said. "But here I have still some of the leaves of athelas that I gathered near Weathertop. Crush one in the water and wash the wound clean, and I will bind it. Now it is your turn, Frodo." "I am all right," said Frodo, reluctant to have his garments touched. "All I needed was some food and a little rest." "No," said Aragorn. "We must have a look and see what the hammer and the anvil have done to you. I still marveled that you were alive at all." Gently he stripped off Frodo's old jacket and worn tunic and gave a gasp of wonder. Then he laughed. The silver corselet shimmered before his eyes like the light upon a rippling sea. Carefully he took it off and held it up, and the gems on it glittered like stars, and the sound of the shaken rings was like the tinkle of rain in a pool. "Look, my friends," he called, "here is a pretty hobbit skin to wrap an elven princeling in. If it were known that hobbits had such hides, all the hunters of Middle-earth would be riding to the Shire. And all the arrows of all the hunters in the world would be in vain," said Gimli, gazing at the mail in wonder. "It is a mithril coat. Mithril! I have never seen or heard tell of one so fair. It is the coat that Gandalf spoke of. Then he undervalued it, but it is well given. It was well given." "I have often wondered what you and Bilbo were doing so close in his little room," said Merry. "Bless that old hobbit. I love him more than ever. I hope we get a chance of telling him about it." There was a dark and blackened bruise on Frodo's right side and breast. Under the mail there was a shirt of soft leather, but at one point the rings had been driven through it into the flesh. Frodo's left side also was scored and bruised where he had been hurled against the wall. While the others set the food ready, Aragorn bathed the hurts with water in which Athelas was steeped. The pungent fragrance filled the dell, and all those who stooped over the steaming water felt refreshed and strengthened. Soon Frodo felt the pain leave him, and his breath grew easy, though he was stiff and sore to the touch for many days. Aragorn bound some soft pads of cloth at his side. "The mail is marvelously light," he said. "Put it on again if you can bear it. My heart is glad to know that you have such a coat. Do not lay it aside even in sleep, unless fortune brings you where you are safe for a while, and that will seldom chance while your quest lasts." Excuse me. When they had eaten, the company got ready to go. They put out the fire and hid all traces of it. Then, climbing out of the dell, they took to the road again. They had not gone far before the sun sank behind the westward heights, and great shadows crept down the mountain sides. Dusk veiled their feet, and mist rose in the hollows. Away in the east the evening light lay pale upon the dim lands of the distant plain and wood. Sam and Frodo, now feeling eased and greatly refreshed, were able to go at a fair pace, and with only one brief halt, Aragorn led the company on for nearly 3 more hours. It was dark. Deep night had fallen. There were many clear stars, but the fast waning moon would not be seen till late. Gimli and Frodo were at the rear, walking softly and not speaking, listening for any sound upon the road behind. At length Gimli broke the silence. "Not a sound but the wind," he said. "There are no goblins near, or my ears are made of wood. It is to be hoped that the orcs will be content with driving us from Moria, and maybe that was all their purpose, and they had nothing else to do with us, with the ring. Though orcs will often pursue foes for many leagues into the plain, if they have a fallen captain to avenge." Frodo did not answer. He looked at Sting, and the blade was dull, yet he had heard something, or thought he had. As soon as the shadows had fallen about them, and the road behind was dim, he had heard again the quick patter of feet. Even now he heard it. He turned swiftly. There were 2 tiny gleams of light behind, or, for a moment, he thought he saw them, but at once they slipped aside and vanished. "What is it?" said the dwarf. "I don't know," answered Frodo. "I thought I heard feet, and I thought I saw light like eyes. I have thought so often since we first entered Moria." Gimli halted and stooped to the ground. "I hear nothing but the night speech of plant and stone," he said. "Come, let us hurry. The others are out of sight." The night wind blew chill up the valley to meet them. Before them a wide gray shadow loomed, and they heard an endless rustle of leaves, like poplars in the breeze. "Lothlórien!" cried Legolas. "Lothlórien, we have come to the eaves of the Golden Wood. Alas that it is winter." Under the night the trees stood tall before them, arched over the road and stream that ran suddenly beneath their spreading boughs. In the dim light of the stars their stems were gray, and their quivering leaves a hint of fallow gold. Lothlórien, said Aragorn, glad I am to hear again the wind in the trees. We are still little more than 5 leagues from the gates, but we can go no further. Here let us hope that the virtue of the elves will keep us tonight from the peril that comes behind. If elves indeed still dwell here in the darkening world, said Gimli, it is long since any of my own folk journeyed hither back to the land whence we wandered in ages long ago, said Legolas. But we hear that Lorien is not yet deserted, for there is a secret power here that holds evil from the land. Nevertheless, its folk are seldom seen, and maybe they dwell now deep in the wood and far from the northern border. Indeed, deep in the wood they dwell, said Aragorn, and sighed as if some memory stirred him. We must fend for ourselves tonight. We will go forward a short way until the trees are all about us, and then we will turn aside from the path and seek a place to rest in. He stepped forward, but Boromir stood irresolute and did not follow. Is there no other way? He said. What other fairer way would you desire? Said Aragorn. As a plain road, though it led through a hedge of swords, said Boromir. By strange paths has this company been led, and so far to evil fortune. Against my will we passed under the shades of Moria to our loss, and now we must enter the Golden Wood, you say. But of that perilous land we have heard in Gondor, and it is said that few come out who once go in, and of that few none have escaped unscathed. Say not unscathed, but if you say unchanged, then maybe you will speak the truth, said Aragorn. But lore wanes in Gondor, Boromir, if in the city of those who once were wise they now speak evil of Lothlórien. Believe what you will, there is no other way for us, unless you would go back to the Moria gate, or scale the pathless mountain, or swim the great river all alone. Then lead on, said Boromir. But it is perilous. Perilous indeed, said Aragorn. Fair and perilous. But only evil need fear it, or those who bring some evil with them. Follow me. They had gone little more than a mile into the forest when they came upon another stream flowing down swiftly from the tree-clad slopes that climbed back westward toward the mountains. They heard it splashing over a fall away among the shadows on their right. Its dark, hurrying waters ran across the path before them and joined the Silverlode in a swirl of dim pools among the roots of trees. Here is Nimrodel, said Legolas. Of this stream the Sylvan elves made many songs long ago, and still we sing them in the north, remembering the rainbow on its falls, and the golden flowers that floated in its foam. All is dark now, and the bridge of Nimrodel is broken down. I will bathe my feet, for it is said that the water is healing to the weary. He went forward and climbed down the deep cloven bank and stepped into the stream. Follow me, he cried. The water is not deep. Let us wade across. On the further bank we can rest, and the sound of the falling water may bring us sleep and forgetfulness of grief. One by one they climbed down and followed Legolas. For a moment Frodo stood near the brink and let the water flow over his tired feet. It was cold, but its touch was clean. And as he went on, and it mounted to his knees, he felt that the stain of travel and all weariness was washed from his limbs. When all the company had crossed, they sat and rested and ate a little food, and Legolas told them tales of Lothlórien that the elves of Mirkwood still kept in their hearts, of sunlight and starlight upon the meadows by the great river before the world was grey. At length a silence fell, and they heard the music of the waterfall running sweetly in the shadows. Almost Frodo fancied that he could hear a voice singing, mingled with the sound of the water. "Do you hear the voice of Nimrodel?" asked Legolas. "I will sing you a song of the maiden Nimrodel, who bore the same name as the stream beside which she lived long ago. It is a fair song in our woodland tongue, but this is how it runs in the western speech, as some in Rivendell now sing it. In a soft voice, hardly to be heard amid the rustle of the leaves above them, he began. An elven maid there was of old, a shining star by day. Her mantle white was hemmed with gold, her shoes of silver grey. A star was bound upon her brows, a light was on her hair, a sun upon the golden boughs in Lothlórien the fair. Her hair was long, her limbs were white, and fair she was and free, and in the wind she went as light as leaf of linden tree. Beside the falls of Nimrodel, by water clear and cool, her voice as calling silver fell into the shining pool. Where now she wanders none can tell, in sunlight or in shade, for lost of yore was Nimrodel, and in the mountains strayed. The elven ship in haven grey, beneath the mountain lee, awaited her for many a day beside the roaring sea. A wind by night in northern lands arose and loud it cried, and drove the ship from elven strands across the streaming tide. When dawn came dim, the land was lost, the mountains sinking grey, beyond the heaving waves that tossed their plumes of blinding spray. Amroth beheld the fading shore, now low beyond the swell, and cursed the faithless ship that bore him far from Nimrodel. Of old he was an elven king, a lord of tree and glen, when golden were the boughs in spring in fair Lothlórien. From helm to sea they saw him leap as arrow from the string, and dive into the water deep as mew upon the wing. The wind was in his flowing hair, the foam about him shone. Afar they saw him strong and fair go riding like a swan. But from the west has come no word, and on the hither shore no tidings elven folk has heard of Amroth evermore. The voice of Legolas faltered, and the song ceased. "I cannot sing any more," he said. "That is but a part, for I have forgotten much, but it is long and sad, for it tells how sorrow came upon Lothlórien, Lorien of the Blossom, when the dwarves awakened evil in the mountains." "But the dwarves did not make the evil," said Gimli. "I did not say so, yet evil came," answered Legolas sadly. Then many of the elves of Nimrodel's kindred left the dwellings and departed, and she was lost far in the south in the passes of the White Mountains, and she came not to the ship where Amroth her lover waited for her. But in the spring, when the wind is in the new leaves, the echo of her voice may still be heard by the falls that bear her name, and when the wind is in the south, the voice of Amroth comes up from the sea. For Nimrodel flows into Silverlode, that elves call Celebrant, and Celebrant into Anduin the Great, and Anduin flows into the bay of Belfalas, whence the elves of Lorien set sail. But neither Nimrodel nor Amroth ever came back. It is told that she had a house built in the branches of a tree that grew near the falls, for that was the custom of the elves of Lorien, to dwell in the trees, and maybe it is so still. Therefore they were called the Galadrim, the tree people. Deep in their forest the trees are very great. The people of the woods did not delve in the ground like dwarves, nor build strong places of stone before the shadow came. And even in these latter days, dwelling in the trees might be thought safer than sitting on the ground. Sorry, that was Gimli. He looked across the stream to the road that led back to Dimrill Dale, and then up into the roof of dark boughs above. "Your words bring good counsel, Gimli," said Aragorn. "We cannot build a house, but tonight we will do as the Galadrim, and seek refuge in the treetops, if we can. We have sat here beside the road already longer than was wise. And,
Aw.
It is a pretty good place to stop.
Yes.
Because they're like resting for the night.
Yeah, we should rest for the night.
the
too.
company now turned aside from the path and went into the shadow of the deeper wood, westward along the mountain stream, away from Silverlode. Not far from the falls of Nimmerdale, they found a cluster of trees, some of which overhung the stream. Their great gray trunks were of mighty girth, but their height could not be guessed. "I will climb up," said Legolas. "I am at home among trees, but by root or bough, though these trees are of a kind strange to me, save as a name in song. Melirn they are called, and are those that bear the yellow blossom, but I have never climbed in one. I will see now what is their shape and way of growth." "Whatever it may be," said Pippin, "they will be marvelous trees indeed if they can offer any rest at night, except to birds. I cannot sleep on a perch." "Then dig a hole in the ground," said Legolas, "if that is more after the fashion of your kind. But you must dig swift and deep if you wish to hide from orcs." He sprang lightly up from the ground and caught a branch that grew from the trunk high above his head. But even as he swung there for a moment, a voice spoke suddenly from the tree shadows above him. "Darrow," it said in a commanding tone, and Legolas dropped back to earth in surprise and fear. He shrank against the bole of the tree. "Stand still," he whispered to the others. "Do not move or speak." There was a sound of soft laughter over their heads, and then another clear voice spoke in an elven tongue. Frodo could understand little of what was said, for the speech that the Sylvan folk east of the mountains used among themselves was unlike that of the west. Legolas looked up and answered in the same language. "Who are they, and what do they say?" asked Merry. "They're elves," said Sam. "Can't you hear their voices?" "Yes, they're elves," said Legolas, "and they say that you breathe so loud that they could shoot you in the dark." Sam hastily put his hand over his mouth. "But they say also that you need have no fear. They have been aware of us for a long while. They heard my voice across the Nimrodel, and knew that I was one of their northern kindred, and therefore they did not hinder our crossing, and afterward they heard my song. Now they bid me climb up with Frodo, for they seem to have had some tidings of him and of our journey. The others they ask to wait a little, and to keep watch at the foot of the tree until they have decided what is to be done." That is where I'm going to stop for the day, and we will continue and finish up the chapter tomorrow. And actually, I got further into it than I thought I was going to, but that is all good. All right, so I hope you're enjoying the story. Sorry we had a bit of a kerfuffle earlier, and we will...
Tell them I'm okay.
And Mom says she's okay, and we will see you again tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great night.